Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, we're hardly done with the Delta variant of COVID that's caused the loss of lakhs of lives in India. And now, for the last few days, there is conversation on yet another mutation. It's called the Delta Plus variant, and there are indicators that this could be even more bad news. What's clear is that this virus has shown the ability to mutate every few months. And this is the big problem, because it seems that the pace at which this virus mutates is clearly much faster than the pace at which we can keep up with new vaccines or modifications of vaccines. On this show, some of India's experts actually involved in the genetic sequencing of this new variant and those who've been following its evolution very closely. But before we get to them, what do we know about this particular variant? It's called the Delta Plus variant. Now, it's been formed due to a mutation in the Delta variant. That is the variant which was originally found in India. It's now dominant across our country, and 80 other countries around the world it's been detected. But this Delta Plus is characterized by the acquisition of a new mutation, a mutation called K417N. Don't worry about the numbers, we'll explain it. But this K417N is also found in a variant which is the South African variant, and also in the Brazilian mutation. Now, there is thus far no indication of severity, no immediate cause of concern, but we've heard that before, right? When we spoke for several months back on the Delta variant, no immediate cause of concern. That's the worry. There is precedent for this becoming a cause of serious concern. Now, there is a possibility of immune escape with this new variant. An immune escape tendency needs to be studied, however. The new mutation which is there in Delta, this K417N, could be resistant to monoclonal antibody treatment in India. That's a new line of treatment. It's offered a great deal of hope. It's very expensive, but it shows that if a patient is given monoclonal antibody injections at the right phase, when they are in mild to moderate disease, then the chances of them getting out of hospital or even going to hospital in the first place are reduced substantially. Thus far, and so what we are saying now is that this particular strain may not work as far as monoclonal antibody treatment is concerned. Thus far, 63 Delta Plus cases have been reported in the UK, 6 in India. So the Delta Plus is mostly found in Europe, Asia and America, according to some sources. Well, we've got some wonderful guests joining us. Dr. Soumitra Das is director at the National Institute of Biomedical Genomics and really an expert and possibly the best person to speak on this entire issue. Dr. Rahul Pandit is a member of the Maharashtra COVID Task Force, and Dr. T.P. Lahane, no new face over here at all, is with the Directorate of Medical Education and Research and very much an expert. So, Dr. Das, let me come to you first. What do we know about Delta Plus's spread in India thus far?
See, as you said rightly, Vishnu, that RNA virus mutation is not a surprise. Actually, the virus keeps on mutating, and actually whatever mutation suits them best for the infectivity or to survive inside the host, actually naturally selected. So, the mutations will keep on happening. This particular variant that we are actually concerned at this moment is actually was, as you said, was reported in South African variant last year. And this particular positions, this is in one of the protein that interacts with the receptor and helps the virus to get inside the human host. And there is a mutation, there is a site called receptor binding domain, and this mutation is actually in one of those key places in the receptor binding domain. But whatever the results are shown, experimental results, that this particular mutations that we are talking much, that has occurred from the South African variant and now it has come into the Indian Delta variant, actually should not increase that much of affinity towards the receptor. Because
it should not increase the affinity to the receptor means what?
Affinity towards receptor means the spike protein binding to the SE2 receptor complex actually is little destabilized because of this particular mutation. The virus does it to compromise its actually challenges against the antibody. And that's how this could have an immune escape property, but it may not have, needs more validations. It may not have higher infectivity.
Okay.
this is something which we are thinking, but needs to be checked with a larger pool of samples and with more data and experimental evidences.
Okay.
But this 417N, actually, as you said, that it was found in the South African, and now, it was also reported in some cases in Brazilian variant, but now it is coming into Indian. So we need to see how it actually, this mutation behaves in the context of other mutations. Remember, all these mutations that we are now systematically having different names, calling alpha variant, beta variant, delta variant, gamma variant, like those. Like if you remember, started with the UK variant, then South African variant, then Brazil variant.
Right.
In between there was a California variant and now Indian variant. Now all these variants have different mutation sites. So a particular mutation which was actually making a havoc in the South African variant may or may not have a similar impact in another context.
Okay, I got that. I just want to go across to Dr. Pandit. Sir, on the basis of what you know, how far is this spread in India, in our country?
Hi, good evening, sir. I don't think that there has been a lot of spread which have been documented across the country. From what I hear, 6 cases in India, which is what has been reported. I haven't seen an official report which has sort of come out and said that these are the 6 cases in the districts. I think Dr. Lahane might be able to sort of confirm or have some more light on that.
Sure.
But it is a concern for us in terms of clinical context. I look to it from as a clinician purely who sees patients. Every new variant of interest can become a variant of concern. Obviously, it depends on what Dr. Das said, that the infectivity is high, the virulence is high, or you actually have a new symptomology which comes with that. So it needs to be seen with great interest how we are actually going to see at this virus, the new variant virus, as the days go by. And we need to sort of nip in the bud right now itself, because we need to contain that spread within the localized area. If at all we have found positive cases there, concentrate our testing in that area, do as much genome sequencing as we can do hundreds of samples, maybe thousands of samples to sort of collect it and find out whether we actually have that kind of variant which is prevalent in that population. And then obviously the testing, tracing, containment and treating. The 4 T's have to sort of come in.
Dr. Lahane, again, can you give us an answer? How spread is this in India thus far? Do you have an answer to that, sir?
Yes, see what we see from March onward, we can see few this type of you can say delta plus variant. But this delta plus variant is noted, and also I think it is also updated in the global data for this delta plus this one. But what we see today, that variant it is not today. You can see as the Das sir has told, it is because of the immune response, and the cases what are noted in these cases what we have seen, the clinical symptoms or severity of the disease is not there. Secondly, if it has happened from near about now 1 month to 2 months, the infectivity is not increased. So today also the dominant is delta only. Delta plus is not dominating. So it is not, I think, cause of concern. And what happens in any variant, you can say in virus, you get the variant. And this variant, like the Das sir was telling, this variant is the property of the virus.
No, so but see, Dr. Lahane, and this, let me interrupt as somebody who has been tracking this on a daily basis, though certainly not a doctor myself. Several months back, when Delta first emerged, and you had Dr. Joshi in Maharashtra saying, there is a variant, there is a variant, there is a variant on the same program, I think on a Sunday night as well. Everybody said, look, let's not spread panic alarm, let's not do this, we don't know, we don't have enough data, we do not have genetic sequencing in enough numbers, we need to do a lot more of that, let's focus on what we know. And then we know now, how right he was and how these mutations go crazy absolutely. Let's face it, sir.
Yes.
So this is a worry, and we shouldn't be having this conversation 2 months later when this has exploded. So Dr. Lahane, I mean, that's just an observation more than a question.
Yes, Vishnu, I know, because of that only, from that time only we are doing the sequencing regularly, and we have started the sequencing from month of May, and month of June we are doing, 3,600 samples, 100 samples from each district.
Right.
And that we are taking care that is there any mutation like that we noticed in the Amravati that time. So this time also, once we are noticed in the this one Ratnagiri, we did another 50 samples, and in that we came to know that it is again reduced. It is only 3 positive patients were there, and we have seen that first it was 5. After doing 50, it came to 3, and so the cases also we tracked, and all these 8 cases, mild cases were there. And I think again, to say more, we have to epidemiologically do the study of all the districts that we are doing.
Sure.
And that is regular. This is not because of this mutation, but we are doing a regular study, and that is required in the such type of pandemic.
Okay. So, Dr. Das, several questions to you now. Firstly, what is our pace of genetic sequencing specific to Delta Plus?
Right. So, as you said, we are actually taking it seriously, and we are actually, there are 10 laboratories across India in different regions, as you know, as a part of the INSACOG activities. We are sequencing routinely and monitoring, and now at present, we are actually deeply analyzing the data to figure it out how many samples shows these particular mutations. At this moment, it looks like very few, as Dr. Lahane pointed out, but we should not be complacent, and we are actually closely monitoring and try to expand our network. So we are actually trying to add another few more sequencing centers so that we can ramp up more sequencing. As Dr. Rahul Pandit also pointed out, that we need to have a targeted sequencing, more sequencing in some of the pockets where you are seeing this variant, and try to see whether it is actually spreading or it's actually crossing the threshold or not. So that we are actually doing it, and we'll continue doing that. And as you said correctly, it is also important to somehow connect it clinically with the clinical symptoms and see whether this is causing any mild, moderate, or severe diseases. For that, INSACOG is trying to expand. Actually, we are exploring these situations with different hospitals to have a hospital network connected with the INSACOG, so that we'll have well-characterized samples sequenced. Then you match the sequence, you match the mutations and the severity in the patient, and then you can have a conclusive results to say that actually this particular mutation, something needs to be watched out.
So, Dr. Das, can I ask you, sir, based on what you're telling me, and since you would all agree that this is a fight against time, we either say this is very dangerous for us, or we say no, we have evidence to suggest that it is not. Right now, we are still probing. So, my question is this: in 3 weeks from now, would we have enough genetic sequences to make a decision on where this Delta Plus is headed in our country? Is that a reasonable time period?
Yes, I think it is already, Vishnu, we are already analyzing the data. It looks like it's not only in Maharashtra. There could be sporadic cases in other states also.
Oh, you've lost that.
That we are
okay, you have, sorry, Dr. Das, your signal is freezing. We'll come back to you in a moment. Dr. Pandit, I'm running short on time. What would you like to add, to this debate? We're all probing for questions and answers. What do you believe? What is concerning you?
What's concerning me is that I don't know what symptoms this new variant is going to present with. Last time with the Delta variant, when you mentioned about Dr. Joshi talking, we were discussing, me and Dr. Joshi do a show, we were discussing about the GI symptoms, which became a big prominent issue in the whole second wave, because a lot of patients actually had GI symptoms to begin with, did not realize that they had the GI symptoms because of COVID-19, and before they could actually realize, the entire household was infected. So it's not just the symptoms with which the patient is going to get critical or not. It is also important to understand what symptoms the patient is going to present with. And then, of course, the big question is about the vaccination and the treatment protocols. So for example, the monoclonal antibody, which you said, if it's not going to be effective against my vaccine and monoclonal antibody, as a clinician, it extremely concerns me.
But Dr. Das, we lost your line. So just answer that question. I asked whether in 2 or 3 weeks you would know how dangerous this is, and just repeat your answer.
Right. So essentially, I just said that we are analyzing the data so far we have obtained from different zones, and we are also sequencing more into those pockets where we are seeing surge. So we should be able to analyze and conclusively tell you in another few weeks' time to somehow correlate the surge and the mutations.
And then
establish the connections.
To establish the connection. And therefore, Dr. Lahane, once that takes place in the next couple of weeks, we have to home in on hotspots, right? And we have to take action there, right?
Once it takes place, we see this because we are now sending, it is not from Maharashtra but all over country. We are from Maharashtra, we are sending the 3,600 samples. And once we come to know that in which districts, which taluka, then we will have to isolate, and then we will have to do the containment, micro containment, and the I think that time we will have to take actions.
So, Dr. Pandit, could you explain why there is a sense that monoclonal antibodies may not work on this?
So monoclonal antibodies may not work because every variant which come across, monoclonal antibody may not be able to effectively block off the binding, which Dr. Das was sort of mentioning about. And if that's what we are going to have, if the antibody does not effectively block off the viral replication, will happen. And then you will have a disease which will progress anyways. So that's where the worry is. But I think monoclonal antibody is the tip of the iceberg. I am not just worried about monoclonal antibody. I'm actually worried about the other three aspects which we mentioned. Symptomology, spread in terms of infectivity, and the virulence. Then comes the question of monoclonal antibody. I think the first three answers need to be looked at.
So, and that is the bottom line, Dr. Das, and I suppose that will be the first question on your mind. Do the vaccines work against this? And if so, how effectively? How do you get to that answer?
So essentially the vaccines usually use multiple epitopes. So maybe one mutation can have an effect of one or two epitopes, but it's highly unlikely that it will disable all the other antigenic epitopes and the vaccine will be completely ineffective. So that's not the case. That's not going to happen. So I think vaccination is important. No matter whether it's a variant or the wild type, vaccination is going to protect. That's number one.
Okay.
Second thing is the monoclonal antibody is targeting a single epitope. So it's ideal to use a combinations or a cocktail of monoclonal antibody. So that is the answer to somehow defeat these mutations or frequent rate of mutations in the virus.
And Dr. Das, how many genetic sequences are we presently doing linked to COVID?
So far, we have around 35,000 sequencing done, and since the INSACOG started, and we are analyzing. It's not only the sequencing; you need to somehow correlate with the metadata, like whatever Dr. Rahul was saying, that you need to somehow connect it with the severity and other clinical manifestation. Then only it will be more effective in terms of public health decisions. Again,
just so that our viewers know, how long does it take to genetically sequence a sample? I mean, how does it happen, sir?
So usually we get samples and the RNAs from different centers, and they come to the regional sequencing laboratories, we call RGSLs, genome sequencing laboratories. And from there we make cDNA, and then we sequence. Now there are processes. So by the time the sample arrives the place, and then you need to have this procedure followed and finally get the sequence. And after the sequence, they start working different platforms to analyze the data. We call variant calling to find out whether the known mutations are there, whether there are unknown mutations that are cropping up. That takes time. So within, I would say, 10 to 12 days, results should come out from a particular batch. But again, some of the machines has a high capacity. So you need to have enough samples accumulated to run the machine cost effectively. And that's how we are trying to increase the number of centers so that we can somehow ramp up the sequence even with the smaller capacity machines and try to expedite the process of faster sequence and deliver the results.
Dr. Das, have you been able to visualize the Delta strain? Do you know what it looks like? I mean, do your electron microscopes or whatever it is that you use, do they show it looks different?
Right. So actually, there are some cryo-electron microscopy done, not with the Delta variant, but the original variant. And, there are some published literature now to somehow, it's a modeling, although. So they predict that they are actually in the RNA binding domain, receptor binding domain, RBD, and they are located in the vicinity of the place which is important for antigen presentation. So, those things we can visualize. But again, prediction is one thing and validation is other thing. We need to have more biological experiment or even at least recapitulate some experiment in animal model, try to see whether we can correlate these mutations with the virulence or its immune escape property or other things. That needs to be done.
Dr. Das, I'm just repeating this one question again so that we are all clear on this. In the next 3 weeks, we will be in a position to assess the danger posed by Delta plus in this country, right? Is that correct? Should be. All right. Dr. Lahane, and again, the viewer watching this program, a lot of people are already, the science of this is too much. So, a common question which is asked is, why is this mutating as fast as it is? Why is it always several steps ahead of scientists like all of you? Why is it ahead of the process of vaccine manufacture? And therefore, the question is, does this seem to be like any virus that you have encountered in all your decades of experience?
Yes. See, the virus, you can say the mutation of the virus are always ahead of all scientists. And we are behind the mutation. We are not in front of the mutation. But we know the chain, we know how they mute, and in that what is important for the human being. So that is only we take. Otherwise, you will see in this mutation there may be 1,000 mutations, but those are not of the clinical importance or not of the importance of the spread of the infection. That is important. So I think the infection, this mutation is a property of the virus, and because of that, that is going to mute, and that is always because of the immune response in the body.
Okay. Dr. Das, is the rate at which very serious mutations have presented themselves in the case of COVID faster than what you have seen in other viruses you have dealt with?
Certainly, yes, because I think that the spectrum of infection and the number of infected persons at a time actually probably helped this. At the same time, as the virus faces resistance because of the immunity or because of vaccines or other challenges, virus tend to mutate faster. So that's also you have to keep it in mind. Like for flu virus, it also mutates, but it mutates more by recombination or smaller mutations like we call antigenic drift. Very rarely it happens in a shift. But in this case, it is much frequent. At the same time, you have to remember, this is some disease which is across the world in all countries. At a given time, I don't think, unless you go back to the Spanish flu, we had this numbers, matching numbers in any other epidemic situations. And that's basically, for RNA virus, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And that's basically something really we need to consider.
Yeah.
But what you are just saying before this Lahane's question is, we are trying, actually, the Secretary of DBT, we are just having a conversation today that is it possible that we can come up with a plan that it will be a predictive thing to predict that which all mutations are to look for. But, it is need to be done collectively, nationally, with all laboratories and international help so that we can come up with some kind of a platform to predict that we should look for this mutation, because it takes time to attribute that this mutation is going to affect us.
Yeah.
So if we can save that time, that will be good. But anyway, we are trying to explore as much as we can with all the scientists and the expertise available in the country and international.
Dr. Pandit, last question to you. There are several new vaccines coming online. Of course, we've seen Covishield and Covaxin give us a certain element of protection. We obviously want more protection. Is there anything in the science or the design of some of the new vaccines, for example, Novavax or Zydus Cadila, which we are talking about, or even the biological E subunit vaccine which is coming, which leads you to believe that mutations might be better tackled with the new vaccines coming online? I'm not even talking about Pfizer and Moderna.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so that can be said with certainty that any vaccine is going to tackle with the mutations effectively. The whole virus, dead virus vaccine seem to offer a little better protection than the other ones, which is like the mRNA and the other vaccines. But I think we have to be very, very vigilant. And if you really ask me, even today, until we actually have a large population vaccinated with vaccine, the best vaccine is double masking.
Thank you so much, sir, for saying that. Thank you so much for saying that. And I think that is the perfect way to spread that message. And you know, I mean, all of us are with our masks, and a lot of people have asked, when you anchor the news, why aren't you wearing a mask? That's because there is nobody within 25 feet of me in this particular studio, and our rules in office are absolutely clear. An N95 mask or 2 masks, double mask in this situation. An office is segregated into 2, one shift doesn't meet the other. There are chimes in our office every few minutes to remind people to sanitize their hands. That's the level of seriousness that people need to take. So please, everybody, the best safety for all of us is to wear that mask and to protect ourselves, needless to mention, vaccinate. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us. Good night.